everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I'll be honest, it's just really kind of an extension of everything that I have talked about with Kentucky basketball this offseason, but why we are talking about it today, why we are addressing it on a Tuesday show here in mid-June, is because I actually thought my old buddy, Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio, good friend of mine, I worked with him for a couple years at KSR. He shared some very interesting comments on his show about the state of the program that basically address everything that I have been saying all offseason and maybe make it even a little bit worse. All the problems that I've talked about, too many freshmen, complete inactivity in the portal, seemingly having no idea how NIL is working at every school other than Kentucky. Matt talked about it all. I want to address his comments, address what Cal is doing wrong. Can it be fixed? Is it too late? Let's get into all of it. Before I do, it is worth noting Matt made his comments, I think, on Thursday or Friday of last week, and there were two things that have happened since then as it pertains to Kentucky basketball. One, they did at least get another player for their 2023-2024 roster. That is because on Monday afternoon, or Monday morning really, Jordan Burke, 6'8" forward, overtime elite, ended up committing to UK. Three-star forward had been committed to Ole Miss. And what I will say, I'm not going to crush Cal on this one because, one, you just need bodies at this point. And two, at the end of the day, I think Jordan Burke's probably a little bit better than people think. Have talked to some people at OTE that are familiar with his game, and they have essentially said, like, look, this is a kid, he started late to basketball, isn't somebody that kind of grew up playing the sport. And so we believe that he has NBA potential. He's just not a one-and-done guy. Needs to work on his skills, needs to work on his weight and his frame, needs to get into a college strength and conditioning program. But we do believe that he has NBA talent down the road. And so I actually think this is a nice late summer pickup for Kentucky. The problem is, again, it's the same thing that we've talked about all offseason, another freshman to an insanely young roster. The second thing that happened this weekend was not good at all. It was Arthur Kaluma, who I would argue was the last really big impact type transfer in the portal, had verbally agreed to take a visit to Kentucky. Just one problem. He took a visit to Kansas State first, and on Sunday afternoon, officially announced that he was committing to Kansas State, meaning that Kentucky is out of the picture on another big time transfer. And so essentially, those two stories right there, in one fell swoop, in like a 30-second explanation, that is Kentucky's entire offseason right there. If you want a microcosm of Kentucky's offseason, that was it right there. It's all the stuff we've talked about plus more. It's the fact that Kentucky started moving too slow in the transfer portal, wasn't aware of the players who were thinking about leaving and coming and going, not in tune with their own guys, and now they're scrambling in the portal when there's no options left. And they are going to enter 2023-2024, which will probably go down as the oldest year in college basketball history with all the fifth and sixth year guys because of the COVID waiver. They're going to go in with maybe the youngest roster in the history of college basketball themselves, with 2 sophomores returning and right now 6 freshmen coming in. They're probably going to add some more freshmen. And there is a minor possibility that Antonio Reeves could come back off last year's team, although it is not looking like that. And so I bring it up because, again, that is a microcosm for what the entire offseason has been like at Kentucky. And what is especially interesting is that it came on the heels, again, of Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio, sharing some very interesting insight on his radio show over the last couple days about the state of Kentucky basketball. Now, it's worth noting, Matt has publicly said, me and Cal don't have the greatest relationship right now, But Matt knows everybody in the administration. Matt knows all the big boosters, and Matt tells it like it is. And so when Matt says something is going down at Kentucky, it absolutely is. And his comments were very interesting. So I'm going to read a few of his comments right now, and then I'm going to react to him because it is going to shed light into everything that you need to know about Kentucky athletics. So one, here is the first quote from Matt Jones on his radio show, Kentucky Sports Radio, about the state of Kentucky basketball. He said, "This is a fact. This program in the last few months has been in complete disarray. Nobody knows what's going to happen, including the coaches. It has been in disarray, and anybody that says otherwise, it's just wrong." Not a great portrait of where things currently are with, again, players that you weren't expecting to transferring, players that you weren't expecting to stay in the draft, staying in the NBA draft. You're now rallying to recruit 3-star high school prospects that nobody had was even aware were on your radar a month ago. It is chaos, and Matt Jones just said that. Two, and this might be the even more revealing quote, is one, this is what he said. He said, "Players come and go. That worries me less than the other stuff." And again, if people don't want to believe this, they don't have to, but this is the truth. Calipari has no connection with the main boosters of this program, specifically the main couple, and it's killing us. It just is. The people around the program can't talk to him. They don't know what to say to him. And he is completely isolated from everybody. I want to get into those two quotes because to me, if there are two paragraphs that paint a picture for what Kentucky basketball is right now, those are it. And I say that as a guy who largely defended John Calipari during the year. First of all, the first quote is both mortifying and, if you were paying attention, appears to be a reality. The fact is, this program in the last few months has been in complete disarray. Nobody knows what's going to happen next, including the coaches. Well, I'll be honest. I don't necessarily have all of the insight into Kentucky basketball that Matt Jones does. Now, I believe I have a lot, but maybe not as deep ties as he does. I don't know if anybody in the media does. But to me, that absolutely explains so much about what has happened this offseason. Because we're going to talk about the portal in a minute and the kids that you're missing on. But if you just look at this offseason, that is the number one thing that has stood out to me. There is absolutely, it appears as though there is absolutely no game plan. Nobody knows what's going on. And John Calipari not only has he's not in touch with both his current players and anyone that he is recruiting. I've said it before, but listen, let me even backtrack, okay? Because I think it's important to note this on Kentucky before we move forward. It's not just that they lost a couple guys to the NBA draft. What I think is actually worse for Kentucky basketball, I'll be blunt, is that they lost several players to the portal that I don't think that they were expecting to lose. Lance Ware, who was a backup, 4-year guy, high school basketball in Camden, New Jersey. A bunch of his former high school teammates are coming in. He hits the portal. CJ Frederick, I know he's from Cincinnati, but played basketball in Kentucky, 2 injury-plagued years. He decides to leave. Oh, by the way, this Antonio Reeves situation is insane. Star player, 37 points in the regular season finale. And it appears as though now, after withdrawing from the draft, he is trying to graduate so he can transfer to another school, so he could be a graduate transfer. If that doesn't speak to absolute chaos, I don't know what is. And what might even be worse is the conversation about the boosters. The bottom line is it is 2023. It is going into 2024. The transfer portal world is here. The NIL world is here. And if you do not have a connection with the money people, it is not going to get done. You are not going to get the players that you need to win at the highest level. You are not going to compete at the highest level. And I'm not saying that you have to buy your way to a national championship in 2023 or 2024. All the elements have to be in place. You have to have the right culture. You have to have the right people. You have to be about the right things. You have to have a coach that vibes with his players. But NIL is a thing that is a reality. And if coaches are not in touch with their boosters, you cannot win. And so that is what's going on. And really quickly, this is the important part. If you take nothing else out of this, Kentucky fans, this is what has to happen. I want to three things absolutely have to change just based on what Matt said late last week. One, as far as, let's get to the last quote. First of all, let me start by saying this. One, let's get to the last quote first. You have to have some contact with your boosters, or you have to know that boosters at least have support, and you have to be in touch and in tune with this NIL era. I understand that Cal was at the forefront of what he thought NIL was going to be. He's been in favor of NIL for the last 3, 4, 5 years in the lead up to NIL. And I get that this is not what he was envisioning. He was envisioning players getting legitimately paid off of NIL, having an opportunity to endorse local products. But what NIL is right now in this era of college athletics that John Calipari still wants to be a part of, it is about collectives. It is about having an amount of money available to go after marquee players, most notably transfers. That doesn't make it wrong. That doesn't make it illegal. That just makes it a reality of the situation. We can pretend like guarantees aren't made, but that is the reality. We can pretend that collectives aren't as important as they are, but it is a reality. I'm not saying everybody's NIL is perfect. I'm not saying collectives are perfect. But what I am saying is, if you don't even acknowledge that they exist, it's just not going to work. And don't blame the transfers. Don't blame the transfers, because remember, these are not players that are going to be rich beyond their wildest dreams in the NBA in a year from now. Most of them are in their 4th or 5th year of college. They have 1 year to get paid, and then they're either going overseas to the G League, or they're going to be making cash, selling insurance, or working at Enterprise someday. So the idea that they don't want or deserve that, it's just not reality. So that's one. You got to get into the 21st century with this NIL stuff. It isn't what you thought it was going to be, but that is out of your control. You can either accept it or die. Not literally, metaphorically. You can either, what is the old saying, evolve or die. Right now, Cal, you can take the metaphor wherever you want. I think you understand what I'm saying. 2, and this is important, you got to have a better pulse of your team, man. You just have to have a better pulse of your team, and you have to move quicker when stuff happens. Listen, players come, players go, as Matt Jones said. Players want to transfer for a variety of reasons. But what should never be happening is Kentucky being blindsided the way that they are. Every program in America, as best I can tell, has essentially what exit interviews, right? Basically, the season's over. Are you, what's, first of all, what's your plan? Are you coming back? This is how we envision your role. This is what we need you to get better on, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't seem to be an issue at literally any other school in America. Just give you an example. My alma mater, UConn, won a national championship, got 6, 7 guys coming back off that team, plus a high school recruiting class. Whoever. Alabama had a couple guys test the draft waters, but guess what? They have about 5 guys coming back from that SEC championship team that was a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. You go on and on and on down the list. What cannot happen is you cannot be blindsided because I can't say definitively that he has no communication with his players, but it sure seems like that. Lance Ware transferring in the last week of May was both shocking, surprising, and I think caught John Calipari by surprise. CJ Frederick probably transferring when he did caught John Calipari by surprise. Obviously, Antonio Reeves not seriously considering returning to Kentucky once he pulled out of the NBA draft caught John Calipari by surprise. I do think, for the most part, if you're honest with players, they will be honest with you. What you can't have is assumption. What you have to have is communication, and you have to have moving parts. I've said it a million times. Eric Musselman, the Arkansas coach, when a player enters the portal or a player enters the NBA draft, the assumption is that they're gone. There is no assumption that they're coming back, and Eric Musselman recruits as though they are gone. And then at that point, if the player wants to come back, Eric Musselman will, of course, hold a scholarship for him or make sure there's a spot available for him. But at the same time, and by the way, that happened with Devo Davis this year, a fourth-year senior for Arkansas. But what Eric Musselman isn't going to do is sit around and wait until the day of the NBA draft deadline to try and figure out if a guy's coming back, if he's not, and then move from there. You cannot do that in 2024. You simply cannot. You have to know your guys. You have to have a pulse. You have to figure things out. And don't tell me a couple things. One, don't tell me he had a pulse for Lance Ware. Lance Ware waited until May 29th to enter the portal. And oh, by the way, maybe it wasn't May 29th. I might have made that up, but sometime in mid to late May. And he's just gone. And oh, by the way, once that happens, you have to find a guy. You have to find a body. And don't tell me that Kentucky can't get anyone out of the portal, even as a role player. Guess what? They've done it in the past. Nate Sestina, remember him? He was a big part of Kentucky's team that was good enough to win it all in 2020. Reed Travis was a starter, but he was ultimately the fourth, fifth best player on a team that had Tyler Hero, PJ Washington, and Keldon Johnson. You can get players, but you can't wait until the last minute. And then three, I'm just going to be blunt. I have heard enough stories this offseason to know that his recruitment of transfers is a disaster and just completely wrong. Okay, so I'll try to be quick because I know this segment's going long. But the bottom line is that recruiting portal players, as I've told Kentucky fans for years, is totally different than recruiting high school players. High school players, especially elite ones that know they're going to the NBA, you can be straightforward. You can give them the come here, the sum is greater than the parts, be part of something great, and we'll still get you ready for the NBA in a year. And he has the track record to do that. You don't have to be a star at Kentucky to have a very successful NBA career and to go very early in the draft. Anthony Davis, what was it? Fifth most shots on the team. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, whatever it was. Number 1 and number 2 in 2012. Eric Bledsoe, I wrote a freaking book about the 2010 team, was the second point guard in that class, was drafted in the first round. And so I bring it up because that works for high school players, and John Calipari is great with that approach. I am also here to tell you it definitively does not work for transfers. Why does it not work for transfers? Well, let's think about it. You think if you're 22 years old, you think if you've established yourself as a college basketball star, and you have 1 year of eligibility left to get the absolute most out of your situation, do you think you want to hear, well, come be part of the team. Let's see what happens. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. Maybe you come off the bench. Maybe you start. No, of course not. Listen, I can tell you definitively. I know for a fact, because I know people close to the recruitment, that was their spiel to Cam Spencer from Rutgers. Come here, be part of something. Maybe you get to start. Maybe you don't. We'll see. And he was like, what? I just averaged 13 points per game at Rutgers in the Big Ten. 43% three-point shooting. And you're telling, I just averaged 13 points per game in the Big Ten. And you're telling me I can come here and maybe compete for minutes? By the way, that doesn't mean you have to play second fiddle to the freshmen. There is a starting spot in the backcourt for another guard. Cam Spencer can very much play alongside DJ Wagner, a 5-star freshman. It can happen. It can be done. By the way, it's the same with Arthur Kaluma. I was told while I was traveling this weekend that Kaluma was basically told they couldn't guarantee him a starting spot. This guy just started on an Elite 8 team. On an Elite 8 team. In the Elite 8. 12 points per game. NBA talent. And you're asking him, you might have to come off the bench? What? Hey, by the way, there's a spot for him in the starting lineup too. He's a 4. He's a stretch 4. He's an NBA 4. I know Aaron Bradshaw, the other 5-star freshman, there is a spot for him in the starting lineup. Now he's going to Kansas State. Keyshawn Johnson's another one. Now, I don't blame Kentucky fans, but they were telling me, he's willing to come off the bench. That's what he did at San Diego State. No, if he wanted to keep coming off the bench or play a role, he would have just stayed at San Diego State, where he just competed for a championship, where he just was a game away from winning a national championship. He specifically left that school because he wanted a bigger role. I don't know if he asked for a starting spot, but he wanted a bigger role. The idea that, oh, he's just a bench piece for Kentucky. Are you kidding me? He would have been the best player at Kentucky on day one next year. Not the one with the most NBA upside, not the one with the best this. He would have been the best player on Kentucky's current roster if you could have gotten him to commit. And so that's it. I'm done. Matt's quotes were great. Matt's quotes are revealing because it puts all of the puzzle pieces together in my head of what has gone on, what is wrong, and what needs to be fixed. You have to figure out NIL. Collectives are getting more complex, more smart, better every year. If you want elite transfers, if you want transfers, period, you got to have it lined up, ready to go. You got to have a better pulse on your team. You got to know who's coming and going the day after the season ends. I'm sorry. No one else was losing players in the manner in which Kentucky did. And you gotta get the transfer portal, the pitch down. You just have to. So that's my rant. It's officially over. The one thing I will say, and I do think it is worth noting because there is so much negativity with Kentucky right now, but it is worth noting that John Calipari's best teams, their best teams, have been led by star freshmen. Still think DJ Wagner has a chance to be a very special college basketball player next year. I still believe Aaron Bradshaw does too. Justin Edwards for sure. I just don't know if they got enough around him. You got to find some vets, man. And I don't even know who's left at this point. I don't know who's left that has real options. You got to find some vets. You got to find some guys who've been there. You got to get it done.